This is a test. So, like, if you can hear me, that's good.
The Central Party has okayed. So it's not just one backbench MP. There is like the party's putting infrastructure behind it. So that indicates a choice there. We can also see that they spent, at the same time.
Oh, it's working.
In Europe, what were they doing in the House? Well, they were counter-programming.
All right.
With a motion that was like an anti-refugee healthcare motion. Again, something that is reaching out to that same segment of the conservative base. So they are clearly making choices that are not that are not at the fringe of their party.
I'm testing stuff out.
Being made centrally to try to do both of these things at the same time, and of course that is a risk. And this is a really good example of one that they're in a clever wedge right in the middle of their own caucus. There are, I think, a lot of topics that would likely be very animating for that base within the conservative movement, but
all right, I'm timing how far behind I am. All right, there's a 15-second delay, but it works. I'm even leaving a chat.
don't have the same regional cleavages that this one does. And I think, to me, it's really interesting because it might also suggest that he's not getting good Quebec advice. He's not getting a good, strong Quebec lens on those decisions.
Okay, so the microphone picks everything up just fine. First test passed. The microphone even works so well that it's picking up the echo from my headphones because I have headphones so loud. That is cool. I chose YouTube because I can swear, I can smoke dope, and I can tell you all types of crazy shit, and I don't have to worry about getting banned. So that's why. And you know what? I'm just going to leave this turned on. Yes, I hold my head that still for long times. So it works. Cool. Do I start now? Oh! There's nobody here. I can get away with shit. This is how this is going to go. Drop in. Listen to the shit I listen to. And interact. I should put the second camera on my TV. That's what I'll do. There's all my screens. Normally we have Geof up there in the other chair. But, you know, that's just the way it is. There's Geof's spot again. I keep forgetting I'm going along with what I can see on my screen on my YouTube that I'm watching. I should stop listening with the headphones, that's for sure. All right. No, we're not ready. But you can hear me. I'm going to set it up so that you can hear me, but whiteboard discussion. Gonna add a source. I'm doing this all live actually while you're watching. So I'm going to do, I'll just go capture his camera. Click, copy, whiteboard discussion, paste. Big. So you can see what I see. Second stage, capture, copy, whiteboard, paste, reference. Boom. Built live. While we talk. All right. I'm going to be small. What you watch will be big. That's better. Now I got to move that camera. All right. Here we go. Hey everyone. Oops.
Let's see.
Yeah, you can see what I see. Cool. That's what I'm watching. All right. I'll turn it back on.
I'm already shaking my head at Scott.
All right. To link the two conversations we've been having, Canadians believe we're in a very serious time. Very serious time.
I'll turn it back on.
And Canadians believe that Carney is a serious person for that serious time. Here's my setup softball question. What is a shittier response to that than talking about this? Don Cherry, talk about making yourself look unserious.
Oh, they're mad about Don Cherry.
I think that Polyev has two imperatives right now that are in great tension with one another. And we've talked about this for the last few weeks, but this is a really good example of them coming into direct conflict. So imperative number one is that he needs to broaden his appeal to a wider array of more mainstream Canadians, and that's what his trip to Europe was about. That's what his economic speech in Toronto is about. That's what going to the U.S. is about. It's about shoring up his credibility and trying to point out that he is somebody who can potentially play in some of the, maybe if not the same leagues as the Prime Minister, at least on some of the same terrain. But he also has another imperative, which is that he has to hold together not just his vote coalition, but also like his base within his party, his base that has been very, very animated by a lot of these more culture war elements over the last 3 years. And so he has a tension here. He needs to do that broadening, but he's also got to continue to feed the base to deal with that internal division. But of course, the problem comes when
I thought it was past the convention he didn't need to care about his base anymore.
Well, I think that what we're seeing is that his actions are to the contrary. He clearly seems to think that he still needs to feed this base. And I'm going to give two examples. This is one. And I will disagree a bit with Scott. Like, this is not a bozo eruption. You can see the petition about this. This is hosted on the Conservative Party's website. They're using their main accounts to promote it. So like, this is something that the Central Party has okayed. So it's not just one backbench MP. There is like, the party's putting infrastructure behind it. So that indicates a choice there. We can also see that they spent, at the same time that Carney was in Europe, what were they doing in the House? Well, they were counter-programming with a motion that was like an anti-refugee healthcare motion. Again, this is something that is reaching out to that same segment of the Conservative base. So they are clearly making choices that are not one-offs, that are not at the fringe of their party, but are rather being made centrally to try to do both of these things at the same time. And of course, that is a risk. And this is a really good example of one that, they landed a clever wedge right in the middle of their own caucus. There are, I think, a lot of topics that would likely be very animating for that base within the Conservative movement, but that don't have the same regional cleavages that this one does. And I think, to me, it's really interesting because it might also suggest that he's not getting good Quebec advice. He's not getting a good, strong Quebec lens on those decisions internally. Because, of course, what is the first, cardinal fucking rule of Canadian politics? It is you must have a regional lens on these decisions that you're making. And I think that, it would suggest that in this one, they likely didn't. I think that they've probably done more harm to the Conservative brand in Quebec this week than they've done good with any of the trips and anything that they're doing. And they've done it at a moment where the Conservatives are already struggling in Quebec. So it's a double blow. And then, of course, the fact that it highlights caucus divisions right when they're coming off a period where they've lost MPs to floor crossing. Those divisions mean more in that situation. So I think it was a real blow, and it's something that, it's indicative, I think, of that tension between those two strategies that they're clearly trying to run at the same time.
Fred? So I think the big issue here is when it comes to these type of things, Conservatives just can't help themselves. We can't ignore it. Don Cherry got the Order of Ontario, so people started talking about it. We're into that time of the season when these orders are given out. And it just became this thing where we have to get out there and champion someone that we feel should get it. And that's one of those things where Don Cherry is a cultural icon amongst many people. He's viewed as a voice of the unheard. He's this blue collar type spokesperson, and many, many Canadians who think he's being snubbed. And there's this anti-elite movement within the Conservative Party that feels it's, there's guys like us can't get these type of things, that we're blocked from it. So they jumped on this, and they do it without real thought and what it could mean and how it could blow up in other parts of the country. My colleague in my firm, Eric Antoine Menard, wrote a very good Substack. He's a Quebecer, on the damage this could do to the Conservatives in Quebec, and it's stuff that I wasn't even aware of. Some of the stuff Cherry said about French Canadians. Always thought his attacks were more on Europeans. So it was, yeah. So it was, there is going to be blowback from this, and we saw Conservative members of Parliament, including the Quebec lieutenant, to the leader, come out and say this was a bad idea. But again, it's one of those things where we just can't help ourselves when we see these things go out, and it's undisciplined, it's unhelpful, and if liberals are confused about why we do it, it's because we don't always look through the lens of how do we win elections. We look about.
I'm building it live on the fly. I can't use my hands very well, so I'm doing the best I can do.
When it comes to electoral success.
But yeah.
It's fascinating that this whole all started going by.
What's that?
I just think it's a fascinating footnote that
I
this thing started.
didn't make my bed before starting this, but
Ford goes to his
today is basically
and that
today is basically spend the day with me. That's the goal. I can't make my camera any lower though; it's built in.
Idea, and next thing you know, they've got
what happens when parties are elected, right? Whether it's the Liberal Party in the prairies, or the Conservatives in Quebec, or the
I gotta make my bed. I have to make my bed.
When you have no presence or a really, really weak presence, that voice is not strong enough.
I could sit in my new wheelchair and do this,
to get
and be
you
somewhat presentable with a backstage.
Because Quebec is very, very big.
But if this is my life, this is real. So here you go. Anybody else stuck in this position? That's what I'm here for. I'm not here for my healthy friends who are working and have a life. I'm here for the people that are stuck at home and feel useless. You're not useless. Oh, it feels useless. But you're not.
All right.
Look how much struggle it is for a guy with a broken back and bad legs and hips to make his quick in bed. Two hands crawling. And a shaky voice to boot.
Telegraphed months and months ago, and then didn't happen until this.
I like military type sheets.
But I'm just going to start with my opinion, which is I don't believe, having thought about this now for a couple of months.
Maybe it's a mental problem that I need military type sheets. I like to be able to.
Agree or disagree? I fully agree. I don't think people are sitting there.
Like to hear a snap in them.
Minority government. I mean, Justin Trudeau essentially had a majority for years
Ow.
of the NDP, and people weren't
back on my knees.
But it wasn't in the general public.
So now you have the two cameras, so you can kind of get some bedroom action here.
It's clearly not having a negative impact.
Not that way.
It has more or less excuses.
You can hear me, my show, and you can see around the bedroom a little.
You seem to think that
when a new character comes in, if they have main character energy, they're going to be on camera.
Territory, but I think I've come around to you.
So,
I was worried initially.
This is my heating pad. This keeps my feet
arrogant or assuming
from freezing because I don't have any circulation.
Become conditioned.
Thanks to the disease, it's taking my circulation.
That much of an eruption.
So,
it's way less
my fingers and toes freeze below room temperature.
No question about it, right? So if you start from the assumption that the guy wants a majority and needs a majority for the program that he has to lay out. How do you get that? I think they're choosing the better of the two options.
I have like one other, like, I don't have a ton to say on this, and I have a question in the thought. My question is the one unexplored territory of this have a little bit more to do with the discussion and dynamic between himself and the MP around the north when you think about these issues and how it's playing into it, and not just investment, like not just in a crass way, but like how that member of parliament is like, I have a prime minister now who seems to be genuinely seized with this issue, and I think the economy is seized with this issue because he has to be given the threats posed by the Chinese, by the Russians, and in parentheses, the Americans. And so I wonder if that's a bigger part of the dynamic. And then my question is, are there more? And I know that's the most part of the room kind of like, gossipy kind of question, but like people keep like talking in a fever pitch. There's a couple more conservatives, and so like I wonder like as this happens, does it create a dynamic where if I'm in a swing riding and I'm a conservative and I'm looking at the polls and I'm looking at these four crossers, do I say there doesn't really seem to be as big a penalty to crossing the floor? Maybe I can make this move and I will. Or do they say, I don't know, man, like now I'm just going to look like I'm one of 7 or 8 and it doesn't, I don't know how that, I'm feeling more attention and more focus and more concentration on me within my own party, but I don't think that there's going to be a big payoff in terms of what I'll benefit from. So, like, I just don't know how all that, like, are there 2 or 3 other loose fish, and will anything come of that?
But what would they be considering?
So,
what would they be considering?
things suck sometimes.
We've just talked
I hope Don Cherry gets the Order of Canada. I don't care what anybody thinks.
We've talked about the struggles.
Let's talk about Don Cherry.
Yet sitting here without knowing anything about the next 3 years, I bet $1,000 the Liberals lose the next election. Just because of time. Just because of
The Liberals will lose. Life cycles. They've been in power a long length, and very few people overcome that. The cycle will prevail.
So I'm just saying, if you're an opposition MP, why would you want to move to these people now?
Well, 3 years in government is not an unattractive proposition, particularly for a lot of the people who ran for the Conservatives. So I do think that also some of this will depend, as we saw before, what Poilievre's caucus management. What is that experience like for Conservative MPs?
This is what we're watching.
How do they see their place within that caucus? I do think it is worth saying that for Lori, like the North is also
today is watch what I watch, and watch me watch it.
Commitment on the North. I think that is very true. It's also just a more nonpartisan place. So this move, I think, is maybe less of a reach in the North than it would be in the South. I do think though that this was in some sense the easy part because Lori was quite critical of this government, prior to the major investments coming in, and she's very outspoken. So I think that, particularly in a scenario where it is a very narrow majority, these 4 crossers are going to have a big voice. So that's going to be an interesting dynamic to watch.
Just a little.
Lori was critical of this government.
Before you try drastic measures, try delay redundancy. Upgraded with triple collagen health tablets to strengthen cellular bonds from within. For firmer, lifted, more radiant skin.
Is there any sound?
So that's going to be an interesting dynamic to watch.
Just to turn them all into a group of Joe Mansions, right? You suddenly have a shift in the dynamic where 4 or 5 or 6 people can say to the Prime Minister, I hold your fate in my hands. So how do they handle that?
I think one of the calculations for
Is there any sound?
they were looking at jumping folks like D'Entremont. They were worried about will this parliament last a year if I don't. Now we're in a situation where I think this parliament could last another 2 to 3 years. So I think that motivation of saving yourself and your seat has dissipated a fair bit. One of the calculations for
Is there any sound?
they were looking at jumping folks like D'Entremont. They were worried about last a year if I don't. Now we're in a situation where I think this parliament could last another 2 to 3 years. So I think that motivation of saving yourself and your seat has dissipated a fair bit. One of the calculations for
set it up. So that's why. And you know what? I'm just going to leave this turned on.
You've got mail. You've got mail.
Second stage.
Regional lens on these decisions that you're making. And I think that, you know, it would suggest that in this one they likely didn't.
So it's not that loud. Not that way. You can hear me, my show, and you can see around the bedroom a little. When a new character comes in, okay, first of all, it's volume. Okay, first of all, it's volume. We're testing volume. Okay, first of all, it's volume. See if I can turn that up. How's that? Okay, first of all, it's volume. We're testing volume. First of all, it's volume. See if I can turn that up. How's that? Is that better? First of all, it's volume. We're testing volume. See if I can turn that up. Like I said, is that better? How's that? Is that better? I think it's a 15-second delay. Like I said, is that better? How's that? Is that better? I think it's a 15-second delay. Like I said, is that better? Yeah, it's better. Is that better? I think it's a 15-second delay. Okay, but there we go. We got my chat. Okay, cool. Forgive me, guys, but I'm 15 seconds behind on average. There. We'll just tuck that up in the corner. Away we go.
So the risk isn't quite there. So I think that could really throw a lot of cold water on any MPs that were thinking, because if you just want them to stick around for a few more years, if you're retiring or whatever, or in a tough seat, you have that time now at least. You can still cross in a year or two. I'm sure the door will still be open if that's the situation they see themselves in.
Did a lot of people run for the Conservatives because they were going to be in government? Like, this is actually normally a trait I would associate with the Liberals more than the Conservatives. The Conservatives have hardcore people running for them that really are believers, and I didn't see Poilievre doing much to recruit people for government. At least it wasn't visible.
Right. So
that was happening. So I'm curious as to these people. You hear this explanation. Well, they thought they were going to be in government, and now they're not in government, so they're moving. Is that a real motivation for people?
I don't think so in this case, because to your point, there wasn't a big recruitment drive bringing in some big name players. There's none of those guys that like.
Sort of Emerson thing.
No David Emerson type characters in here that are crossing. These are long-time Conservative MPs that have been around or involved in the party for a long time. So I don't see that at all.
Right. Cool. All right. Anything more, or should we call in Gordon Pinson?
Mr. Pinson.
Yeah,
Mr. Pinson.
let's have Mr. Pinson.
Ladies and gentlemen, please return to your seats. The Hey Yous are about to begin.
All right. Who's got a Hey You for today?
I got a Hey You.
Excellent.
I got a Hey
See,
You.
I always like to ask in case somebody like you volunteers, so it doesn't have to be Jordan. I know in most cases it's going to be Jordan who goes first because she's ready and she's got her hand up, but you can go, Scott.
Well, I'll go first. We touched slightly on it. I just a couple of aspects my Hey Yous to Pierre Poilievre and his U.S. trip, and I think making a serious effort to look serious on serious issues is a sensible thing to do.
Yeah.
So I think some of the criticism, he's not going to Washington, all that stuff, has been a bit superficial with one big asterisk.
Yeah.
Which we'll come back to. But what I didn't think was serious was his proposal on the auto pact, because for anybody that's paying attention, and I'm not trying to get into politics here, but I'm just trying to get into I'm not trying to get into policy. I'm trying to get into
What are you doing here?
I'm above that.
Yeah, what are you even doing
I'm a
here?
physics prof. Okay, folks, and I got to keep it on the chalkboard. I'm not trying to get into policy, but I think what he's proposed is something that has been manifestly rejected, and is
He's such a big baby.
That Donald Trump wants to save the auto pact. He's made it
I
crystal
would
clear he
beat
doesn't
him
want
in
to
a
save the auto
poker
pact, and
match.
he sees it with hostility. Now, might he change his view? I don't know. Maybe his political self-interest would cause some change.
I would
But
use
right
his
now,
hearts
putting
against
forward
him.
this one-for-one policy, which has to have been debated, and there are sources that suggest that it was proposed to the Americans and they dismissed it out of hand. I mean, I don't know. Maybe it gives you a talking point, but it is a little bit like saying, well, why don't we station people on the moon to see if there's oil there? Like, it's not realistic. Trump is not interested in saying that, and it highlights.
Feel free to comment.
Last week, David, which is that if you consistently position yourself as we will pursue policies that are at the mercy of the United States and their response, you're not going to like where that ends up. The other last little thing I would say, I thought it was a bit unfair the way a bunch of people jumped on him for not going to Washington. But it is a reminder, and I didn't think this was remarked upon.
I like these.
It's a reminder that he couldn't go to Washington. Not because he's weak or any of this kind of, I think, unfair bullshit, but because Giovanni went there and met with the president and the vice president. And therefore, he either has to meet with the president or the vice president, or he's asked, why didn't Giovanni use his contacts to benefit his leader and establish those meetings as well, right? And it's because he didn't want to ask Giovanni, or Giovanni wouldn't be willing to say yes. So there's this awkwardness at the center of it, and it just highlights this taboo
Well,
topic.
would you even want a meeting with Trump, to be honest? I mean, for Poilievre to go and sit there, Fred, in that Oval Office.
Oh, they just can't stand it.
It could absolutely burn you at the stake, right? But I'm just saying, there's also this Giovanni dynamic. It is real, and it is persistent, and it manifests itself in ways small and large on an ongoing basis.
It took away the opportunity. If he wanted to actually have that meeting, he couldn't have, right?
Yeah, that became the access yardstick.
All right, Jordan.
So my Hey You this week is going out to the fine people of Nova Scotia.
Ooh.
One look at Tim Houston's austerity budget and said, no, thank you. And I love to see there was such engagement around this. You had thousands of people out protesting. You had people getting spicy in the gallery of the legislature. You had the premier booed at public events. And it led to at least a partial rollback of some of the cuts that Houston was proposing, so particularly those for seniors, folks with disabilities, those impacting the African Nova Scotian community. And I think that Claudia Tender did a good job out there capitalizing on this issue. So I think it was a really interesting little moment there. We live in a time where that kind of engagement seems like almost a figment of an earlier time, that you can make people mad and they come out and protest, and you can actually lead a government to like reverse almost half their cuts. It is not antiquated, guys. It works. So I think it was really wonderful to see that, and as a shameless partisan, I was very happy to see Claudia Tender do a great job leading that. I think that this kind of stuff can stand her in really good stead. And Tim Houston learned a lot this week. So let's see if they go all the way to rolling back the cuts in arts and culture, which seem really boneheaded, particularly at this moment in our economic trajectory.
Okay. Well, all right. There was a spirited intervention. All right.
Fred has views.
What do you know about Nova Scotia, Fred?
I'll give it to Tim Houston for being a strong leader and being humble and fair and putting out fixing a mistake that his government made. That's not actually my hate, but that is right.
We'll take it.
I do think he looked strong on that. I thought that was a good and smart move by him. My hate is Nova Scotia related, though. The Minister of Natural Resources, Kim Maslin, hey you to her. As we all know, politicians take a lot of shit from people, and female politicians in particular take way too much. Someone tried to break into her house a few weeks ago, and it's been reported in the news, and the person's been caught. But it's just a terrible reminder of how awful people are to our elected officials at times. These are tough jobs. They are a major commitment and sacrifice. All of us here work closely with politicians and understand it's a 7 days a week job. There's not the glory that people think that comes along with it. And it's a tough role, and when you have to deal with that type of nonsense, it makes it even harder. So I just want to hey you to her for being strong on that and going public with it as well.
Hey, by the way, Nova Scotians, we're coming to see you. Coming to see you. Curse of Politics, coming to St. FX University in Antigonish, end of the month. Don't forget. Need bodies. See you there.
Road trip!
Don't leave us hanging.
In the meantime, I want to thank our sponsors for this show and all of you first who watched and listened to the show. See you next week. Build more. Take care of yourselves.
Oh, the show's over. Nobody's here talking, so that's cool. Okay, what else do I do in my day? Alright, let's go find out. I also watch these losers. I cannot stand Gerald Butts, but I watch him. So let's set you up properly here. Alright, this one, gotta change the property. This is what we're watching now. Paste. Okay.
Are you ready for the Moore Butts conversation? It's coming right up.
The Great Lakes and St. Lawrence Seaway, a powerhouse driving our supply chains, supporting over 300 60,000 jobs. It
Wow.
transports
And we're
250
forced to
million
watch
metric
the
tons of
commercial.
essential goods every year,
You've got
from
to be
grain,
kidding.
steel, and building materials. Marine shipping keeps costs down, curbs carbon emissions, and contributes $66.1 billion to the economy annually. In an ever-changing world,
Oh,
the Chamber
shut
of Marine
up
Commerce
with your
ensures our supply chains
propaganda.
remain
Go
safe,
away.
sustainable, and strong.
I
Visit
can't even skip it.
marinedelivers.com to find out more.
There we go. That's what we're watching. Live on the TV. Boom. Let's begin.
Are you ready for the More Butts conversation? It's coming right up.
The Great Lakes and St. Lawrence Seaway.
Oh yeah, you got to watch it again. But I think I can fast forward it.
Jobs. It transports 250 million metric tons of essential goods every year, from grains.
I fast forwarded. Here you go. You can play, bud.
And hello there, Peter Mansbridge here. Welcome to the latest of the More Butts conversations. Gerald Butts, James Moore, both formers in a way, and we'll talk about that coming up. But I want to start on this issue of floor crossings because you know what? It keeps coming back. We've had 4 floor crossings.
I hate floor crossing.
In the last 4 months.
It's
Now,
legal, but I think
that
it
sounds
is
like a lot. It is a lot.
disastrous.
It's not a record, but it's still a lot of people moving across the floor of the House of Commons from the spots that they had been elected to by the people of Canada not that long ago. And that's got some people very interested in this discussion. Pollsters are having a field day with it. Pollsters are always looking for something to poll on, and this one is kind of a natural. And the numbers they seem to be gathering suggest that the majority of Canadians don't like what they're witnessing.
Nope, we don't.
They feel that, I think there's only a quarter of them suggest that the floor
Yep.
crossing should go ahead with no questions asked. Quite a few of the others say there should be an election, they should be sitting as independents,
Yep.
or they should simply vacate their seats.
Yep.
So I want to talk to the two of you about, I got some specific questions on it, but let me...
I like, these are the head sips of Canada. Just keep that in mind.
James, why don't you start us this week?
I was kind of taken aback a little bit this week when Prime Minister Carney welcomed his newest recruit into the Liberal caucus, and she came in and he came down the stairs, and there's a sort of this triumphal strut about it, right? And they go into the Liberal caucus room and they're chanting her name and chanting her name. And I get why, because there is sort of a team sort of rallying moment that happens, you know, that we embarrass the other guys. We got one more. We're closer to a majority. They were gaining momentum. Canadians are with us. We're convincing, you know, the red team and the orange team are cleaving away members and they're joining us. And this is good. You know, rah, rah. I think that's a big mistake. And I don't, because I think part of the poll numbers that you referenced there as well is that Canadians already think that politicians are up for themselves. They don't think that politicians, for the most part, act with great sort of sincerity, and they have a very cynical view of politicians. And there are a lot of really good reasons why. And I think it's really toxic that gets, you know, amplified and weaponized and multiplied. But it happens because of acts like this. There are 343 members of Parliament. Yep. Almost all of them.
I can agree with that.
Will probably stay in the caucus in which they were elected, and they will.
I don't agree with any of these people often.
And I think this really sours.
But I can agree with that.
Because most people, when they go and vote, and the data shows this, not opinion. Most people on election day, when they go in and vote, they're choosing a government, they're choosing a prime minister, and they're choosing a group of people to form government, and they're reflecting their values broadly. Very, very few people, in literally the low single digits, are electing their local member of parliament. Because the truth is, your local member of parliament, whether it's James Moore or Gerald Butts, or if it was, you know, my predecessors or successors in the riding that I represented for 15 years, in terms of your local member of parliament and the services they provide, they can all help you with your passport. They can all help you with your CPP, you know, questions to the government. They can all help you with your Veterans Affairs queries, and like it's the same thing. But the broad reflection, you choose your prime minister, you choose your government, that's really matters.
Is she the writer of that book that I read?
The individual member of parliament crosses a
question mark.
Any really articulate or defensible argument. I think it makes people really sour and cynical about things. And so to be triumphal about something that public sees as cynical, I think is a mistake for the prime minister. I have more to say, but I'll leave it there. So my first impressions of what happened this week with Ms. Idla crossing the floor is the Prime Minister's handling it wrong. His more appropriate, I think the more appropriate move would be, in retrospect, I think he would, on reflection, would think, I've been clear about what my agenda is. I was clear in the campaign. I was clear in my throne speech. I've put forward my economic agenda in our recent budget. I was clear about global affairs and where I think we should go in my speech in Davos. And anybody, whatever your past is, I don't care if you were on the blue team, the orange team, no team, green team, doesn't matter. I don't care what region you're from. If you agree with where I'm going now and where we're going for the next couple of years under my leadership, I don't care about the past. I hope that we align in the future. And if we align in the future, you're welcome to join my team. And leave it at that and just keep walking. But to make it a triumphal thing about something that's pretty cynical, I think is a mistake.
Jerry.
Well, I don't know about the circumstances. I think that James has a point there. I think that part of the Prime Minister's appeal is that he's not seen to be a particularly partisan person, right? And so I can see why James would draw that conclusion from what happened this week. I think the challenge from having been involved in these things in the past is that once you, once you set a precedent for how you're going to handle them, then you end up doing that for each successive one. And they've had 4 in the last 4 months, as you say, Peter. So when they set the mold for Chris D'Entremont from my home province in Nova Scotia back before Christmas, I think they just ran the playbook for each of them afterward. And that's why you saw what you saw with Laurier. I think, I did a bit of research on this, Peter.
Shut up, Gerald.
And I think it's important to note that this is a super common thing, right? More than 300 people have crossed parties in the history of our parliament, which averages out to a little more than 2 a year for the history of the country. So I think it's one of those things the pollsters can, it doesn't surprise me that the general public would have the reaction that the pollsters are the sounding that they're getting. But that's true of a lot of rules when it comes to politics, and certainly when it comes to parliament, that people aren't 100% conscious of them, but if you ask them about them, they'll think it's a bad idea. And if you take that question in isolation out of context from the rest of what's happening in national politics, then people won't like it. But I also don't think it's normally a huge deal. Of course, it's a huge deal in this context because it brings the government one seat closer to a majority government, and that gives them a certain amount of control over the proceedings of Parliament, and more importantly, from a practical perspective, the proceedings of the committees of Parliament. So this kind of inexorable march toward a majority is, of course, worth commenting on, and therefore all of the people who contribute to it are going to see more scrutiny than they otherwise would. Nobody really cared how Leona Alice-Lev was welcomed by Andrew Scheer into the caucus of the Conservative Party, whereas when Belinda Stronach crossed the floor in whatever year that was, I'm sure James remembers it.
He's going to always make counterpoints to the Conservatives because he's a total liberal simp and Trudeau's best friend. They went to school together their whole life.
My own view is that I think it's good for Parliament if people think that
he was the first to get fired.
Is not guaranteed to be there if they don't behave in a way that
he mishandled Jody Wilson-Raybould.
Values of the team members. I think it's a good thing that people can cross the floor if they feel
and Lavalin
like, or the other party is doing something that they do like.
Okay, let me play devil's advocate for a moment because I don't really care if there have been 300 in the history of the country. I get it. I understand there have been a lot, but times change and people's opinions change and the public's opinion changes on some of these things. Sometimes more often at a moment of particular interest like this right now as they march towards the majority. But I want to get back to the fundamental issue, which is these people are elected by the people in their riding. I totally understand what James' argument is about, or his position is about why they vote particular ways, not necessarily because of the local candidate, but nevertheless, that's why they voted.
If anybody ever has any questions and is actually here learning what I learned, feel free to ask. I love answering.
So you come up to a situation like this, and the suggestions that Angus Reid put forward in his poll.
I dispute that, by the way, Peter, but
which one?
Well, the part that people are voted for because of their parties, I think it depends on the circumstance. if you look at two of the four people here, Chris D'Entremont and Laurier, they were both elected because of who they are, not what party they represented. In Nova Scotia, the Liberals, we won 10 of the 11 ridings in Nova Scotia, and the Nunavut.
Okay, so overall, I think what James was suggesting was that overall, if you looked at all 300, whatever number there are, a majority of them end up being elected because of who their leader was or their party was, what have you. But I accept what you're saying about the current four.
Because we need it to fit.
Reid seemed to suggest in the results he got is that most people think, okay, fine, you've crossed the floor, but you need to get a new mandate from the riding you represent. That there should be a by-election. Yeah, what's the problem with that?
Well, I mean, they're expensive. They cost $2 million per, and it is a disruption. And in a minority parliament, you have a little bit more doubt about the fluency of parliament and all that. I don't agree with Jerry, though, that they were elected. Chris D'Entremont has been around for a while, but the Conservatives have won that riding before. Without Chris D'Entremont being there in very recent history, number one. Two, Matt Jenner's riding has never gone Liberal, like ever. I don't think in Confederation. So there's that. But the three, and this is where I would agree maybe a little bit with Jerry, is that among the reasons why I think there was comfort for all four of these floor crossers to the Liberals, one from the New Democrats, three from the Conservatives, is that all of them are actually relatively, in the current polling context, are all pretty close ridings. It's conceivable that the Liberals today could win all four of those ridings in spite of whatever votes may be lost because of cynicism about floor crossing or whatever. All four of those ridings are competitive, and that's actually typical. You don't often see people, Otto Lang or others, but you don't often see people who win their riding 70-30 for the other party cross over on kind of a suicide mission on a temporary basis. David Emerson was an example of that. Where he did cross the floor under Prime Minister Harper in a riding that is Don Davies' riding now. So like that was not a Conservative riding, even though when we won a majority, we still did well in the riding. We got like close to a third of the vote, but a third at a high watermark.
Rooftop fire in
we were going to do there.
New York.
Sorry, I've lost my train of thought. Why don't we have by-elections? Because the cost, it's a minority parliament, you might run into it. All of that. And I think because it's a minority parliament right now, the day of reckoning will come. It will come soon enough. And if the cynicism that I described is true, then they'll be held accountable. I remember Keith Martin. There's one example of a floor crosser. Keith Martin was a Reform MP, elected Reform 93, Reform 97. Stockwell Day, he runs for the Canadian Alliance leadership, runs for the Canadian Alliance in 2000. Didn't like Stephen Harper. And he bought into the high watermark of the Paul Martin movement. And so when the Conservative unity happened, and PCs, Canadian Alliance Reformers, came together for the new Conservative Party, Keith Martin didn't come along for the journey, and he went Liberal. And I remember he and I talked about this at the time, just because, and we kind of actually agreed on a battle plan, just sort of hypothetically, before he actioned it. I didn't know he was actually going to do it, but we were just kind of on a boring day in the Parliament. What would you do if? And I knew that he didn't like Stephen Harper, so fine. So his move was, I was elected to this caucus, I was elected to this party. I can't just go Liberal after I ran for the leadership of the party a couple years ago. This doesn't make sense. So I'm going to sit as an independent for 6 months, consult my constituents, do town halls. And so I've half crossed the floor already, and I can articulate why I crossed the floor, why I don't like Stephen Harper, why I don't like the new Conservative Party. You feel some comfort, let the public know that that's a door that's closed for me. And then as we get closer to the next election, I'm going to go and I'm going to win the Liberal nomination in my riding. And then once I win the Liberal nomination, then I will join the caucus. And then he ran for the Liberals and won a couple times. So that was his move of sort of validating and getting sort of what you're looking for, Peter, some Democratic credentialing behind it. I'm telling you why I don't like my old team, and I don't like the new leader, so I'm going to walk away from that because I just can't do it. I was elected under a different leader, but that leader's gone, and the new leader I don't like, and the new party I don't like. So I'm not going to go that way next time. So I'm going to sit as an independent and honor the fact that I'm the member of Parliament for Esquimalt. Going forward, now that Paul Martin's the leader, I think I like that team. So I'm going to run for the nomination and be the Liberal candidate. And once I get that, now I'm going to be the Liberal candidate. Now I'm going to join the Liberal caucus. To me, that structurally and linearly has credentials and credibility to it. And that's what Keith Martin did. And I think that is an interesting model. Because you can still vote for Mark Carney You don't have to join the caucus and inflame everybody. You know, Matthew Ma, you go to the Conservative Christmas party one night, take your picture with Pierre Poilievre, and literally the next day you're at the Liberal Christmas party taking your picture with Mark Carney, your new leader. I don't know what that Instagram profile looks like. It's kind of an awkward move from one screen to the next, but that's Matthew Ma. All right, well, that's pretty cynical, right? But if he did what Keith Martin described, I think he'd take probably half the energy away from the Senate system.
Barry, by-elections?
Well, I think there are lots of things that MPs do that their constituents may or may not agree with between the time they're elected and the time they stand for re-election. And James is right that we have these elections very regularly, and those are the opportunities people have to pass judgment on the people that they've elected or the people they want to elect. And I'm one who believes that every step we take toward the kind of California proposition system where you can recall people and you can put anything on a referendum ballot. I believe in representative parliamentary democracy, and the person is put there for a period of time, and once they're put there, they have to account for their actions the next time they're standing for election or not. And I really believe in that system. So anything that warps it is I'm going to be predisposed to be negative toward.
Okay, let me be blunt. When this is happening, is the system not saying, you know, the public is irrelevant in this, really? We're cutting up the cash in the back room, and this is the way that we want it to happen. This is the way that makes the most sense for us right now.
No,
It's just months after the public voted.
Yeah, I don't think that's true, Peter. I think that what this is reflecting, especially in the Conservative Party, is real discontent with Pierre Poilievre's leadership. And you had a bunch of people who ran in the last campaign under the assumption that they were going to be part of a government caucus. And the fact that they're not has allowed all of their discontent to flourish in a way that it didn't before the election. And you could argue that change in circumstances is equally stark. So I don't see it that way. I think that we elect people to serve us in Parliament, and then we get a chance to fulsomely judge them based on their 4 years of activity or their 2 years of activity if it's minority circumstances. On average, I think it's 18 months. So I don't see it that way. I think we're asking for trouble if we're getting into the referendum recall situation that they have in the United States.
And I would say as well in the current context, I think I gave the cynical argument, and you can understand why. But I think for a lot of people, if you look at Christophe Tremont and who he is as a person historically, lives a provincial MLA, federal member of parliament, sort of, for lack of a better phrase, sort of red Tory, more moderate, Matt Genereux, Matthew Ma, less read on him. But I think for a lot of people, and certainly in the voting switches that you see, is that it would be quite something to be an acolyte of Stockwell Day and cross over to the caucus of Justin Trudeau. People would say, that's something. That's pretty dramatic. It's quite another to say, like when Pierre Poilievre, who says that Mark Carney is correct in his speech, in his assessment of Donald Trump at Davos and his speech there, that the Prime Minister is correct to spend more time exploiting global markets and diversification. We hope that the Prime Minister is actioning his rhetoric on moving forward with a pipeline and energy exports to the West Coast, and we hope that is successful. The Prime Minister, he got rid of the carbon tax. He did things that Conservatives asked for. He stepped away from the tax on capital gains that Chris Geof. He did things that in very recent contemporary Conservative history, these were the top 4 or 5 things that Conservatives said had to happen. That we need to progress on pipelines and move forward. Whether or not you think Carney's actually going to get there, or there's full sincerity or buy-in, but these things have happened. He got rid of the carbon tax. Like and so Conservatives and Liberals agree in the contemporary arena. They agree on 80% of the issues. The 20% are big differences. The gun buyback program, maybe official language things, CBC. Like there are some big cultural signal things there where the parties have big differences. But in a lot of things, And if you're Matt Jenner and you don't really care about the gun buyback program, and you don't really care about the CBC and whether it exists or doesn't exist, but on things that matter to you as an Edmonton member of Parliament, like energy exports, and you think that there might be an opportunity here for Mark Carney and the progressive wing of Canadian politics to tamp down the typical voices against energy exports as a once-in-a-generation opportunity to get a pipeline built to the West Coast, that's a pretty appealing moment in history to grasp onto and to drive for the benefit of Alberta. You may never get the political credit for it, but if you want to be sort of have a historic moment that's good for your province that you can be a part of, that's pretty appealing.
I'd add to that page in summary. In each of those 4 ridings, what the MP is essentially saying to their constituents is, I think Mark Carney should be Prime Minister, not Pierre Poilievre. And I would bet that in each of those 4 ridings, most of the citizens of that riding agree with that.
There was a minute there, about 2 minutes ago, where I thought James was going to come out and publicly declare that he was now supporting Mark Carney. And even though he doesn't have a seat in the House, he was crossing the floor.
One can agree with elements of others' agendas without wholesale flipping over. But I think that's why. But because if you're looking down the barrel of a minority parliament and you're not particularly comfortable, to Jerry's point, with the current direction and leadership of the Conservative Party, it's understandable why. Like if you're again Chris D'Entremont and you've spent 20 years of your public life being a Conservative and you don't see any prospects that you're going to form government the next little while, but you have an opportunity to contribute. One can say it's opportunism, cynicism, whatever. It's his right to do it. And at the end of the day, voters, the Liberals in the nomination process, or the general public will say, you're wrong, get the hell out of here. Or they can say, fair enough, all things considered, keep it going. We'll see.
And Peter, let's not, as you folks say in your business, bury the lead. The challenge here is, Pierre Poilievre, the dude's in deep, deep trouble, and that's why all of this stuff is happening.
There's a flip side of the coin, though, for the Prime Minister as well. And I talked about the Paul Martin era. When at peak Paul Martin, and maybe we're at peak Prime Minister Carney, I don't know, but there is a
we are beyond peak Carney. People
Martin,
just don't know it yet.
Martin reform MP
the Carney bubble's about to burst.
Progressive Conservative leadership candidate across the floor.
So if you picked Carney, I'm happy.
Emerson was also part of the caucus from the business community.
You're going to learn to not trust politics.
There's one of my favorite quotes in politics is John Quincy Adams said, "Being all things to all people means being nothing to no one."
Yeah.
And there is a concept where if you have enough egos, enough personalities, and enough diversity in your front bench, it makes it kind of hard to maneuver without really pissing somebody off or disappointing somebody. And eventually those disappointments pile up, and then you'll have people break away from you when times get tough. So getting a broad diversity of Canadians in the current Parliament, whether it's Matt Jenner on one side, Ms. Idlett on the other, or whatever, to all agree that Donald Trump is a bad actor who's irresponsible and detrimental to the country. Yeah, you can have a very broad coalition around that. But when it comes to other items that are a little more ticky-tacky, whether it's supply management or taxes or guns or crime or mandatory minimums or name the issue, it can be harder in the out years to hold the coalition together. Maybe that's tomorrow's problem, and the Prime Minister doesn't really care about that. Fine, but when you have too broad of a coalition of people who are completely aligned on one thing, that they hate Donald Trump, there's a limitation to that. Still 1,000 days left in that administration. So
just checking the chat.
Limit, but
I only really talk when I need to, or if you talk.
We just sort of brush over and put Mark Carney and Paul Martin at both their peaks in the same breath. I feel compelled to say that there's about, depending on the poll you look at, a 35 to 40 point difference between the situation that Paul Martin inherited from Jean Chrétien and the one that Mark Carney inherited from Justin Trudeau.
Yeah, but still. No, but honestly, Jerry, but I can tell you, when we were in the official opposition and Paul Martin was coming and Susan Delacourt wrote the book Juggernaut, the whole bit, like the way people are right now talking about Mark Carney, right, at least 10 points up or whatever thereabouts on Pierre Poilievre, the inevitable, the floor crossings, momentum, people like him, Scott Moe, like all this thing, like all this momentum, how it feels right now around Mark Carney in the sense of invulnerability and inevitability about, a majority now and maybe a majority in a campaign in the next year or two. This is how it felt with Paul Martin right now. Right now is how it felt with Paul Martin. This was peak Paul Martin. And it fell apart. in part because of what we're talking about. Too many floor crossers, too many opportunists on the boat. And they, by the way, they all broke away eventually. They all broke away. They all walked away. Keith Martin was, he walked away from Keith. They all walked away from Paul Martin, but at peak Paul Martin, they were all there and enthusiastic.
Assumptions in politics don't prove out over the years. I can remember this long before you were here times. But Richard Gwynne, who was the writer in Ottawa on political affairs, in the summer of 1979, writing a cover piece for something, Saturday Night or one of those places. That Joe Clark, who'd just been elected in May of that year, 79, had the opportunity and likelihood, in Richard's view, to be Prime Minister for the next 10, 15, maybe even 20 years. It lasted a couple more months, and he was gone and Pierre Trudeau was back. So these things, we've all been proven wrong on assumptions made on in political analysis over the time. This has been a great conversation, and we're not finished yet, but we got to take a break. We'll be right back after this.
After more than 2 decades as a journalist with CTV News, asking the questions and now helping clients answer them. I work with CEOs, associations, unions, building confidence and helping them prepare for everything from media interviews to board presentations. It comes down to being authentic, engaging, and relatable, because it's more than just what you say, but how you say it. So let's talk.
And welcome back. You're listening to this Tuesday episode of the Moore Butts Conversations. Jerry Butts, James Moore, both formers, as we like to call ourselves. I'm a former too. And the issue of formers comes up every once in a while. How much sway do formers have in the business of the currents, if you want to call them that? We witnessed the Liberals go through a formers stuff just in the last week or 2 weeks with Lloyd Axworthy, the former Foreign Affairs Minister, and some others, saying the Prime Minister's wrong on Iran and has to change his position, and it led to all kinds of discussions within the Liberal caucus and in the public as well about Canada's position. Formers play a role in the Conservative story of today too, as Stephen Harper gave a pretty good speech a couple of weeks ago that seemed to be signaling to Pierre Poilievre, you should be listening to what I'm saying here in terms of the way you should conduct yourself in the future. Now, my experience with formers goes back to when I was, a young reporter, young journalist, and some of us used to think, okay, our day is coming and we don't need to listen to all these people from the past with their old ideas about the golden days of journalism, in that case. And so, we kind of ignored what they were saying, sometimes for the good and sometimes for the bad. But formers and the role they play in politics, forget about journalism, in politics, are they... listen, obviously there's some good in some of the lessons one gets from those who've been in these positions in the past, but generally, in an overall situation, the formers present a problem when they're speaking from the sidelines. Jerry, you start this time.
Well, they can. I think that I'll tell folks a story that I think will interest our viewership here, Peter. That I think ultimately formers are a test of people's the expansiveness of people's idea of what the party should be. Right? That you should be, if you're comfortable in your leadership and you're comfortable with the direction you're taking the country or the party's policy, if you don't happen to have the privilege of serving in government at the time incidents like this occur, then in some ways I think you should welcome that kind of debate in public. And when you try too hard to stamp it down, you're sending a signal to the public that you're a bit brittle and you need to be careful about having that become part of your leadership style, because I don't think that we appreciate that as Canadians in our public life or in our personal lives. But I'll tell you this funny story because it really comes down to how emotional
This is a little boring.
disagreements can become within parties. I remember it was just after, I think, the 2015 election. I had breakfast with a senior conservative, and one of the press galleries saw us having breakfast and came over and said, I don't get this. Like, you guys are at each other's throats for 8 weeks or whatever it was, and maybe it felt like 800 weeks in 2015, if you remember it well. I don't get it. You're enemies for all this time, and then I see you here laughing, having breakfast together. And I won't out the person I was having breakfast with because you will know them immediately, and so will most of our viewers. But this person said, "Listen, you don't understand politics. Let me tell you something about politics. Jerry's not my enemy. He's my opponent. All of my enemies are in my own party." And there really is something to that. So whenever you hear a former speaking out against a current, whether it's in the Conservative Party or the Liberal Party or whatever party, you always have to ask yourself the question, what is motivating this person? And more often than I think most people in politics would like to admit, it's some sort of personal grievance. Now, with Mr. Axworthy, I don't think that is what's happening at all. I think Mr. Axworthy has a very firm view on what Canada's role in the world should be, and he is articulating and defending that role over and against the direction he believes the Prime Minister is taking the country. I think that's fair ball. I'm more on the Prime Minister's side than former Minister Axworthy's side, as I'm sure wouldn't surprise you, Peter, and wouldn't surprise most people hearing it. But I think it's healthy in any party that you can have that kind of airing. To quote Seinfeld and Dedas, it is a kind of airing of the grievances. You just need to be careful that it's a policy grievance and not a personal one.
Okay, James?
Yeah, I think the observation of is the former speaking out because they're trying to sort of sustain past glory of what they were, and is the criticism or their observations, is it sincere? And so a test of sincerity, and Lloyd Axworthy, he's been consistent in his views, but if there's sincerity to it, then one of the questions I would have, like if I was a reporter and Lloyd Axworthy was going into the Winnipeg Chamber of Commerce, he was giving a speech on global affairs, and in the speech he criticized Prime Minister Carney for his version 1.0 response to the conflict in Iran. He decided to go take a shot at Mark Carney. Well, the question I would ask as a reporter is, you're a member of the Privy Council, you're a longstanding member of the party, a senior statesperson in the long lineage of the party. Have you contacted Minister Anand? Have you reached out to Prime Minister Carney and expressed your views privately about how they might do things differently, and how, I know you didn't like the headline that you saw today, but there'll be headlines tomorrow and next day and next week and next month, and how to craft and shift the government's perspective to your thinking? Have you had those conversations to try to get them to get it right? Because you do have a perspective, and you do have a sincerity, and you do have an understanding of these things that is kind of rare. So if you're genuinely trying to make sure that the country is going in the right direction, are you trying to inform them of your views, or are you just you're trying to be self-righteous, or you're trying to be seen as the wise man, and you're trying to sort of build yourself up as the thoughtful person who got it right a few weeks before the rest of the world got it right and came to your opinion, and so you can feel smarter than the rest of the room? Like, what's your plan here? And if your plan is to actually make the country better by making the government stronger, then I want to hear what you have to say. But I also want to know whether or not you're sincere about it in terms of trying to inform the government and get them to get your perspective as you see it. And if you've done that, and maybe they heard you and disagreed with you, and now you're giving your speech, that's one thing. But if you didn't do the first thing, then I kind of wonder why you're doing what you're doing. And I think that's fair. The second thing as well is, like, as a foreign minister, like, I know, because I do commentary for CTV now and stuff, like, I know half the reason why anybody, maybe more, why, that if I were to say something critical of Pierre Poilievre or of their approach to, say, the public broadcaster or something about the portfolio that I held, half the reason why what I say is of any value or more is former Harper cabinet minister says. former Conservative heritage minister says. And so there's a liability that comes with that I have an obligation to the Prime Minister and the team and the party with which I was elected to be mindful of that. That there are people who will want to take what I say, which I might put out there as constructive criticism, and use it as a bat to hit the successor to Stephen Harper, and to be partisan and just try to say, well, James Moore said that you're wrong about this issue. And I owe it to Pierre as the leader. I never ran for leader. He ran for leader. He earned a mandate. Stephen Harper ran for leader. He got a mandate and entrusted me with the opportunity to be heritage minister. And if I'm going to use that platform, which has been offered to me, and to say something critical, and then they're going to use it as a weapon against my team now, that's not fair. That's not appropriate. And if I genuinely want the Conservative Party to have my view on an issue, I should work within the system, within the party, to offer that. And if I still want to speak critically publicly, then I should do that. But there's a liability that I owe rather, to my party and to Stephen Harper and to Pierre Poilievre to recognize that what I say could be used as a weapon against them. And that's not fair. And I need to be responsible with that. And some people aren't. Performers just sort of speak out and talk about things and try to box in Pierre, say, well, Peter MacKay said this and Chris Alexander said that and Ron Ambrose said this. Well, that's not helpful and that's not okay.
Yeah, and I think I'd be super interested in your perspective on this, because as James was talking, I was thinking of two things. One is there's a clear distinction between former public officials, elected members of the party, especially members of the government, i.e. former cabinet ministers, and staffers. Like I remember when I left Prime Minister Trudeau's office in 2019, I said to Katie Telford at the time, I said, it used to drive me crazy to see people who used to have my job, especially from my party, but frankly also from other parties, go on TV every day and tell me how to do that impossible job. And I committed to my colleagues when I left that I would never do that. And I think almost without exception, I did for the 5 years. I think I gave an interview that annoyed people the day that Justin resigned. But other than that, I was pretty silent about the government's direction. So I'm super suspicious of staffers. And I'm in particular super suspicious of staffers in this era. Because as we've talked about before, you can monetize your audience, right? So if you take the audience that you have built by virtue of and from the benefit of being a public office holder, and then you use that audience to kick the crap out of your former colleagues and make money from it, that is a special kind of infraction in my view. That's like a 10-minute misconduct. So, and I think that those people who do that, and there are very many of them, and I'm not going to name names, but I think we can, all three of us think of many examples. I think that they're just in it for self-aggrandizement. They're not in it for any greater public purpose, and they're certainly not trying to change the direction of the party for the better. What I wanted to ask you about, Peter, and I flip the tables for once, I used to get calls to go on shows all the time, right? Especially, still do, but especially when soon after I left my old job. And it never struck me that the journalist was looking for me to come on the show and agree with the government, right? So if you're in a position like the one I held or the one that James held, and a reporter calls you, the reporter is not looking to report peace and harmony. They're looking to whack a hornet's nest. At least that's always been my perspective. Is that true?
That's a very cynical way of looking at it. Let me put it this way. I'm not in daily journalism like I used to be a decade ago, as I've had to remind a few people of in the last week or so. I'm a podcaster now. I just sit around and ramble in my late 70s about whatever I want to talk about, and it's fun. But on your particular point, why would the journalist go to you in your post chief of staff or principal secretary role, or to James in his post cabinet minister role? Partly because the currents aren't talking, aren't explaining what they're doing, right? And there may be some particular issue that has bubbled up and they're closing off. They're not talking to anybody. So it's not unnatural to go, well, let's go to somebody who used to hold that job. and see whether they can explain to us what's going on. And then you got like Lloyd's actually the situation. And I covered Lloyd since he first entered politics in the 70s when I was in Manitoba. And he has earned that position of going to talk to. You know, you may not agree with him, or you may think his ideas are too skewed one way or another. But he's been there. He's seen it. He knows the ropes for what he's talking about. So it's not, you know, I think it's a little cynical to say you only go after formers to kind of skewer the currents. It's often because the currents won't talk. And so instead of pretending you know what they're going through, you try to find someone who knows what they're going through, who understands that.
Nobody's talking, so I don't talk.
So that's
but you get to be here.
Do you agree with that, James?
That answer.
That's
Access.
I mean, that was, any minister would be envious of that argument, that answer, Peter.
Okay, let me switch topics before we track on this. Yeah. And I got to be careful on this one.
Of course.
It's the Don Cherry story, which has blown up in Quebec. You know, Chantal first warned us of this last week on Good Talk, saying this is going to cause a problem. So what's the issue? Very simply put, he's been nominated as hundreds, if not thousands of Canadians are nominated every year for an Order of Canada. It goes through a process. It can take a couple of years. There's no immediate decision on these things, and there's a lot of discussion that takes place inside this kind of bureaucracy that surrounds the Order of Canada. Now, I'm not going to say much more than that because I'm a member of the Order of Canada. I'm not on any committees. I don't do any of that, but it feels a little awkward for me to say anything about this. However, you two may have a view on it because it is an issue in Quebec, and therefore it's an issue for some politicians outside of Quebec. Because there's a strong movement in Quebec against Don Cherry getting any kind of award like this, given his past comments on francophones, that they be hockey players or not. So I'll let you two, I'm just going to sit back and listen. You, who would like to start this?
Go ahead, James.
I'll frame the question. Well, what's my opinion of the snowstorm?
Yeah.
I mean, you know, the Order of Canada is a special thing, and it's supposed to be nonpartisan, non-political. Should Don Cherry get the Order of Canada? Well, if you circumscribe, you know, his contributions to the game of hockey, which is one of our two national sports and a passion and religion for, you know, many of us, then you could argue that they should Pete Rose be in the Baseball Hall of Fame? Well, you leave out the bad stuff and you only talk about the good stuff. You say, and he's one of the great hitters of all time in baseball and all that. You know, he bet on baseball and he was starting on the game. You can mention that in there, but like Don Cherry, if you circumscribe his contributions to the game of hockey,
what I'm saying is we don't even need sunshine anymore for solar panels to collect
a generation
power.
or two of young men into the sport with rock and videos and
at more than 50%
Saturday commentaries after the first intermission that everybody watched, and you know the iconic music.
This is
and
quite
he made people feel a certain way about a game of hockey and a passion, and therefore he should get the Order of Canada. Then okay, then I can understand that's your perspective. One of the challenges I think that we have as a country and as a society is the failure that we have in order to appreciate other people's perspective. For a lot of Canadians, what I just described about Don Cherry is they see a guy who he had, I think, a grade 8 or grade 9 education. His whole life was hockey. His whole life was talking about hockey, coaching hockey, building up hockey, playing hockey, inspiring people to love the game of hockey, putting out videos about hockey. And he did that for a lot of people, and they feel really passionately that he's their guy. And that he should be rewarded for that. And he had some political views that are, aggressive and rough and ill-articulated in the contemporary or maybe any era. So if you're going to negate people's contributions on the one thing because of their political views, I don't think that's fair. And I think it's fair for people to have that perspective. Like there are other people who have the Order of Canada, artists and others, who have really strident, hard political views. That are, maybe they're anti-American or anti-Israel or they're pretty strident or anti-Western Canada or anti-energy sector. But we look past that because they sold a lot of albums, they have a beautiful voice, and they're really impressive and they're really impressive and accomplished artists, and we will look past their political views because of what they did in the arts. Well, if we're going to tolerate one for one, we should tolerate one for the other. With regard to the current scandal, though, so Andrew Lawton, member of Parliament, signing a petition to get him into the Order of Canada. That's not how you do this. That's not how you fix this. Politicizing this in the other direction and creating kind of a culture war moment and getting people. You don't get into the Order of Canada because you sign a petition. You don't do that. And so I appreciate what he's trying to do in defense of the first cohort of people who were sympathetic to Don Cherry and what he did for hockey. But I think it's fair to also say that if you love Don Cherry because of what he did for hockey, that's understandable. But if you love Don Cherry because he is anti-left and he annoys people, and that's why you're rallying around him, that's not helpful. That's not. Support Don Cherry because of what he did for hockey and inspiring kids and putting out videos and being, all that in its spirit around the game of hockey. And if you think that's why he should be in the Order of Canada, talk about that. But there are a lot of people who want Don Cherry to be in the Order of Canada because he did say some things that were politically incorrect, because he did say some things that inflamed the left. And to be anti-left isn't a reason to be in the Order of Canada. Because of what he did for hockey is a reason to be in the Order of Canada. Articulate that.
Jerry.
Well, I don't know about the Order of Canada, Peter, but as a Montreal Canadiens fan born in the early 1970s, he's in my personal Hall of Fame for the too many men on the ice penalty in 1978. I believe it was that guaranteed that allowed the Canadiens to win their third and fourth straight Stanley Cups. So I'm all
solar panels that work in the cloud.
I think I'd like to pick up on where James left off, and that's the use of this term culture war, right? What Andrew Lawton and Pierre Poilievre are doing with this, how old is Don Cherry now? He's got in his 90s now. And I'm
That's
sure
solar panels for sale for cloudy conditions over 60% collection.
They're using the guy, right? They're just using him to make a point. And the point that they're trying to make is the point that they're always trying to make, that we're on the side of you who feel like you've been left out or downtrodden or looked down upon by the Canadian establishment. And the Canadian establishment values you so little that they will not recognize somebody we both agree should be a hero. And I think that that's the argument they're making. And I don't think they care about Don Cherry, and I don't think they care about the Order of Canada. And that's what bothers me so much about it, that we have so few things in this country, although we have more than they have in the United States, and that's part of why it's such a more pleasant and kind country to live in than the United States. We have so few things that are above and beyond politics that we can all agree should not be just sullied by a daily to and fro argument between as the kids would say, shit posting, between politicians, and just used to try and get some support or build your audience or make a point.
What solar panel can collect up to 60% energy
makes me
even
kind
in
of
the shade?
roll my eyes about this whole thing is that it's just so predictable. And the Order of Canada, and yes, someone like Don Cherry, should be kept separate and apart from this. James is absolutely right. If you are looking at Don Cherry's long career as a hockey coach, player, broadcaster, etc., then you can make a really compelling case that he should be invested in the Order of Canada. If you look at his, frankly, bigoted comments he's made about francophones and lots of other minorities in the country, you can make a super compelling case that he shouldn't be invested in the Order of Canada. I think the people who are trying to make this an issue don't give a flying fig about either one of those things. They're just looking for another artifact of the culture wars at which they can use to rally their side around. And my perspective on it is, to quote another great athlete, John McEnroe, like, you must be kidding me. With everything going on in the world right now, with oil at $100, with the United States losing its mind, with a war in the Middle East, with, this is what you're focusing on if you're an elected member of Canadian Parliament and you're taking time out of your busy day and travel schedule if you're the leader of the opposition to rally support for this, it just shows me they're just not serious people.
Okay. You both had your say. And I listened as our audience listened, and I'm sure they'll pick sides on this one as they do on so many different things. Gentlemen, it's a really good conversation today about everything. And I appreciate your time on it and your wisdom on these things. James Moore, Jerry Butts, we'll talk to you again in 2 weeks' time. Thanks for this.
Thank you.
All right, that show's over and nobody had any comments. Great. Let's go up. What's next on the list? I always go through. Every day has a special release. So, what do we got next? David McGinty. No, we can ignore that. Heavy rain kicks off spring break on BC's south coast. American reacts to why so few Canadians live in Saskatchewan. Okay, we'll start, but I don't know if we'll finish it. I don't even know who this guy is. Tyler Bucket.
New Swiffer Mop Pro is made for small spaces. The upgraded strip has 75% more scrubbing power. And with the new
He learned about Saskatchewan and Alberta today, and he's questioning why 4.8 million live in Alberta and only 1.2 million live in Saskatchewan, even though they're roughly the same size in square kilometers.
What's going on, everyone? I'm just a typical average American here today to react and learn about why so many more Canadians live in Alberta when compared to Saskatchewan. So, I mean, to be honest, like most Americans, I really don't know much about Canadian geography. So today, I thought it'd be really interesting to learn about these two Canadian provinces that I've pretty much never heard about, and certainly never learned about, Alberta and Saskatchewan. What exactly is going on in these places?
Tylenol Extra Strength. Get fast, effective pain relief to keep.
Prefer one over the other. So I want to take a look at this and learn more about this.
Alberta and Saskatchewan make up the prairie provinces of Canada. While both share a similar geography and area size, the province of Alberta has about 4 times the population of Saskatchewan. making it overwhelmingly more prominent within Canada at large.
Wow. 4 times the population. Alberta is objectively a more popular place to live. But like he said, like they rather look very similar. They're in size and shape, and they're, roughly located in like the same part of Canada. So yeah, what exactly is the difference? There's obviously something pretty significant going on here to explain this, I would assume.
So why did Alberta grow so much? And why don't more Canadians live in Saskatchewan?
The prairie provinces.
Saskatchewan and Alberta, 2 of Canada's prairie provinces, are incredibly vast.
Wow.
What we're going to find out is that, despite some differences in the...
Whoa, hold on. I want to take a look at some of this, background video. Is this what it looks like? I mean, I have to choose my words carefully here. There's not much going on. Which province is this, by the way? I don't know. But, so when you have an area like this, where it's mostly flat and it looks like the soil is actually good, obviously the natural thing would for this to be like a big part of Canada where you're doing a lot of agriculture and farming. Maybe that explains why in general, I mean, he said that Alberta has almost 5 million people and Saskatchewan only has 1.2 million, or that's not a lot of people at all. When you think that, it's not a lot of people at all for the entire province. So it seems like these provinces maybe are lots and lots of farmland, perhaps?
Are incredibly vast. And what we're going to find out is that, despite some differences in...
Does it look like this as well? Where is this? I mean, don't get me wrong. Farmers of Saskatchewan or Alberta, this is beautiful in its own way.
Okay, hang tight.
But, this, this is insane. This is just objectively, where's this? Is what?
In the far west, both provinces broadly share the same physical geography. Beginning in the south, both provinces are largely dominated by the flat, expansive prairies of the Great Plains region of Canada.
Okay.
This area is characterized by its deep, fertile soils, which have made it one of the
Yes,
productive
I am
zones
my
in North
own
America.
production studio and everything. I can't do both. I can't do production studio and talk at the same time. I can either be the controller or the speaker.
That's absolutely critical to our survival. I have a lot of respect for farmers and people who not only make
Brought to you by my favorite drink,
we need farmers.
Dr. Pepper. I actually have 3 or 4 favorites.
Probably some of the most underappreciated.
But when it comes to raw pop and Slurpees, I always go for Dr. Pepper first.
So, yeah, a lot of praise.
Into the
there.
recycling it goes.
Is that that's a big role that Alberta and Saskatchewan play? Cool.
The flatness is occasionally broken by the rolling hills and valleys carved by ancient glaciers, with numerous lakes and wetlands dotting the region.
Wait, what? So now this seems unique to me, to have a place like these provinces that have kind of big expanses of flat, boring farmland, useful, fertile soil, growing food, it's great, but kind of boring. And then randomly, some of the most beautiful sights and landscapes you've ever seen. What? That's pretty unusual.
Remnants of the last ice age.
There, I just subscribed to him.
The terrain begins to change due to the vast Saskatchewan River system, which serves as a vital water resource and a key artery for the region's biodiversity. The river's expansive basin supports a mix of grassland, aspen parkland, and boreal forest.
Saskatchewan River system, never heard of it.
Creating a huge range of habitat for a vast quantity of plant and animal species. The central region of both provinces is home to the Aspen Parkland, a transitional biome between the prairie to the south and the boreal forest to the north. This area is characterized by patches of aspen trees interspersed with grassland, providing a unique ecosystem where agricultural lands coexist with natural woodlands.
Wow!
Because we're watching it on two different players, you get different commercials. But I can skip them on that player too, but I'm not gonna. I want the timing to stay the same.
No comment found in Sunstone Clinical Repair provides a blanket over the sensitive areas of the sheep.
I'm kind of shocked the population isn't bigger, and like these areas are beautiful. What's the deal? Neither of these provinces seem to have a particularly huge population.
Particularly huge population. And Saskatchewan is even less. It's only like 1 million. They seem to have very beautiful parts, so I'm a little confused.
As one travels further west, the foothills of the Rocky Mountains begin to rise dramatically from the landscape. This area marks a significant shift in topography, where the rolling hills gradually give way to the sharp peaks and rugged terrain of the Rockies. This region is less suitable for agriculture, but rich in minerals and forest resources.
Oh my God. Canada is beautiful. This is beautiful. Okay, yeah. It's just, I guess, like, no offense, but it's just not something that a lot of Americans think of when we think of Canada, which is a shame. A lot of Americans think of very stereotypically of, like, well, for one thing, cold, flat, cold, snow. I don't know. There's not, an image doesn't really come to our mind very easily when we think of, like, okay, what does the landscape of Canada look like? But it's beautiful. It's perhaps underrated.
The change in elevation also brings a cooler climate and increased precipitation, which supports dense coniferous forests and a variety of alpine flora and fauna. Finally, the far northern areas of both provinces are dominated by the expansive boreal forests of Canada and a vast array of freshwater lakes, including Lake Athabasca, the largest lake in both provinces.
Now, I know that a lot of Canadians try to live as southern as possible, to, like, where it's warmest is, like, a big reason. Very close to the US-Canada border. So I'm guessing a lot of people don't live up north, very north, in these two provinces, and seems to be a lot of forest. Maybe that makes it difficult to live there as well.
Interestingly,
it's the
northern
muskeg
Saskatchewan's northern geography
in
is
northern
partially broken
Saskatchewan.
up by the Athabasca sand
Everything
dunes,
has to be
one of the
stilted,
most
but we're not at
active sand dune
stilts yet
formations
because we've
on
got a
Earth.
lot of hard
Although
land
both
down
provinces
south.
share a lot of similar geography,
But yeah,
one area they differ
there's
is
a lot
the
of
Rocky
tree
Mountains.
cutting.
This mountainous areas of western Alberta is not only striking for their breathtaking vistas, but also for their ecological importance. The Rockies are a crucial watershed, feeding major river systems that flow eastward across the prairies.
So that's cool. And that's something that Alberta has that Saskatchewan does not, is the Rocky Mountain system going in there.
The region is a popular destination for tourism and recreation, particularly in national parks like Banff and Jasper, which are renowned for their stunning landscapes and wildlife.
But those are in British Columbia, right?
Eventually, this leads to the western edge of Alberta, where the province meets the Continental Divide, the boundary line where the flow of water splits between the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. This natural boundary marks the westernmost limit of Alberta, characterized by high alpine environments and the stark, rugged beauty typical of the high Rockies. Both provinces are pretty similar overall, aside from the far western edge of Alberta, which leads to a pretty fascinating quandary. If both are so similar, Why does Alberta have roughly 4 times the population of Saskatchewan?
Yes. Okay. We're
Because
well
Alberta
into
is
this
mostly
video,
hard
and are we
packed
finally
land.
gonna get the answer? Oh, quit dragging it out. Why so many people live in Alberta but not Saskatchewan? Yes. Okay.
Alberta and Saskatchewan, while neighboring provinces in Canada with roughly equivalent land areas, differ significantly in population. Alberta boasts approximately 4 times the population of Saskatchewan, a discrepancy influenced by a variety of historic, economic, and geographic factors.
Okay.
One of the primary reasons for this disparity is the economic development paths chosen by each province, particularly in relation to natural resources. Alberta has been endowed with substantial oil and gas reserves, particularly in areas like the Athabasca oil sands, which are among the largest oil reserves in the world.
Natural resources determines
Are a lot.
so much stuff about not just Alberta and Saskatchewan apparently, but like the world. Like it determines a lot of things about a lot of countries around the world, and your power and has a lot to do with simply like sort of luck, sort of the natural resources that are just in the earth of where you exist. So if Alberta has all this oil, people would go there to get it, and also if there's like maybe there's a lot of jobs around that industry in Alberta, that would make sense.
According to reports, Canada and Alberta specifically hold somewhere around 174 billion barrels of oil, roughly 10% of the world's entire supply. The exploitation of these resources...
Just in Alberta? Hold on. Did I hear that correctly? Just in Alberta, Canada, is 1/10 of the world's supply of oil? Is that right?
This began in earnest in the mid-20th century and led to an economic boom that attracted businesses, investments, and a significant influx of workers from across Canada and around the world. In contrast, Saskatchewan's economy has traditionally been dominated by agriculture, with wheat and other grains being staple products.
So Alberta, oil, Saskatchewan, agriculture, which is a very important thing, like I already said, but perhaps not as lucrative.
Although Saskatchewan also has mineral resources, including potash and uranium, and has experienced its own resource-driven economic booms, the scale and global impact of its industries have not reached the same level as Alberta's oil sector.
What is potash? Hold on. Let me Google this. Potash is a natural potassium-rich mineral deposit used as fertilizer. Oh. Who knew? Okay.
The agricultural sector, while significant, does not typically generate the same level of wealth or attract the same degree of urban migration as oil and gas.
Exactly. So is that like the number? Is it really like that black and white? Like, is that the biggest distinguishing factor? Alberta has a bunch of oil that attracts wealth, that attracts people and businesses, and has a bigger population as a result. Is it that simple?
Another factor is the urbanization trends in both provinces. Alberta is home to 2 major urban centers, Calgary and Edmonton, which are among the largest and fastest growing cities in Canada.
I've at least heard the name. I've definitely heard of Calgary. I think I've heard of Edmonton.
These cities have become economic and cultural hubs for both the province and country, offering more job opportunities, educational institutions, and amenities than are available in Saskatchewan.
But is there a big population because of these 2 cities? Or are these 2 cities there because there's a big population? Do you know what I mean? Like what caused what?
The concentration of universities, international airports, and corporate headquarters makes Alberta a more attractive destination for both domestic and international migrants seeking opportunities and urban lifestyles.
Okay.
Geographically, Alberta also offers a more varied landscape, which has contributed to its appeal. The proximity to the Rocky Mountains provides scenic beauty and recreational opportunities that are less accessible in the flatter terrains of Saskatchewan.
Okay, so no offense to Saskatchewan. There's just more stuff in Alberta. Is that basically right? But Yeah, so it just kind of depends. Like, I can see where most people would be, if they had to choose, would be attracted to Alberta, which is obviously what has happened, according to the stats. But I understand if people, like, certain people are drawn to places like Saskatchewan. Like, and you joke about, oh, yeah, I'd love to live in the middle of nowhere. Well, there you go here. I'm sure there's cool stuff as well, but I don't know. It's like if someone wants to go live in the middle of Ohio or Iowa or, I don't know, somewhere random where it's like, what's there? And it's like sometimes a low population is like very, very desirable. I think there's a sweet spot where you want to live somewhere where there's a lot of cool stuff, there is things to do, but not too cool to where you're waiting in line all the time and you can't get in the restaurant and you can't find somewhere to park, and there's a sweet spot. So I think Alberta or Saskatchewan, based on their population size, kind of both fit that, unless you live in Calgary or Edmonton. That's probably pretty busy. But yeah, I bet these are two provinces where if you just want like a slow-paced, low-key style of life, it'd be like perfect. And probably lower housing costs. If it's a lower population, lower housing prices probably. So I can come up with like a bunch of great reasons why people would live in these places.
This geographic appeal has bolstered tourism and attracted permanent residents interested in outdoor activities such as skiing, hiking, and mountain biking. Banff National Park is the most visited Alberta tourist destination and one of the most...
Is Banff in Alberta? Am I getting it confused with Jasper?
Visited national parks in North America with more than 3 million tourists annually. Government policies have also...
Is Banff in... I can't even... Okay. Hold on. Banff. It's in Alberta. What? I thought it was in British Columbia. Okay. Wow. Okay. If this famous national park is in Alberta, that gives it quite a leg up right there as well.
Government policies have also played a role in shaping the population dynamics of the two provinces. Alberta's tax regime, notably the absence of a provincial sales tax and historically lower personal income taxes.
Say what now? No sales tax at all? Alberta, where? How exactly do you get to Alberta again? Wait a minute. No, low income tax, no sales tax. Okay.
Has made it financially attractive to individuals and businesses alike. Additionally, Alberta's aggressive investment in infrastructure and public services, funded by oil revenues, has improved the quality of life, further drawing people to the province.
Cool.
Finally, the global perception and branding of the provinces have influenced their population growth. Alberta has successfully marketed itself as a land of opportunity due to its booming energy sector and vibrant cities.
I wouldn't know anything about this. Like, maybe they have branded themselves or have a certain image. I have no image of Saskatchewan or Alberta. I have no preconceived notion of either. So,
in contrast, Saskatchewan is often perceived more for its pastoral and quieter lifestyle, which might not attract the same level of internal and external migration. Today, Alberta would be led in population by the overwhelmingly dominant metro areas of Calgary with 1.5 million people.
That's literally the whole population of Saskatchewan.
And Edmonton with 1.4 million people. After that, however, the population numbers drop quickly. Lethbridge, Alberta has about 123,000 people, and Red Deer with only 101,000.
That's a good size, actually. Red Deer, Lethbridge. That's a good size population, probably just right.
Saskatchewan has a similar, though less prominent population pattern. The province is dominated by the Saskatoon metro area with 352,000 people, and Regina with 249,000, followed by the much smaller cities of Prince Albert with 46,000 people, and Moose Jaw with 35,000 people.
35,000. you're starting to... The people at the Burger King are starting to recognize you. The people, when you go to McDonald's, they're starting to know your order, and I don't know if I like that.
But one way that Saskatchewan is unique is that, unlike every other province, it has no natural borders.
Oh, okay.
You make your grocery list, pay for your bucket list.
We're ready for takeoff.
Make so much more than money when you earn Scene Plus points with Scotiabank Everyday Banking. Conditions apply. Learn more at scotiabank.com/banking packages. You're richer than you think.
Saskatchewan, with its distinctive rectangular shape, is unique among Canadian provinces for having borders defined entirely by lines of latitude and longitude rather than natural geographic features.
Oh, no kidding. I've never thought about this before, but I guess that's kind of unusual. That's why it looks like a rectangle.
The prairie provinces have very different populations, primarily due to Alberta having such an incredibly vast amount of oil underneath it. This jump-started the otherwise nascent provincial economy of Alberta in a way that Saskatchewan never really experienced. And unless something changes, Alberta likely will always be considerably larger than Saskatchewan. I hope...
Wow. Yeah, again, this was by Geography by Geof. Great YouTube channel. Bunch of stuff about Canada that I would never, ever in a million years have learned if not for him. So yeah, this was great. This was fascinating. And yeah, it's just fun to like learn about these big important places like in Canada that I've quite literally never learned before. Yeah, and the explanation to this question of like why people live in Alberta more than Saskatchewan, it was all pretty fascinating and very, I mean, at the end of the day, very logical, like the reasoning and stuff. But yeah, it definitely gave me like a better insight into what's going on in Alberta and Saskatchewan as well. Whereas before, I really didn't have like any idea in my mind of what to think of those provinces. Both seem cool for different reasons. And yeah, I enjoyed this. Anyway, if you enjoyed this, feel free to give this video a like or leave a comment with your thoughts on Alberta versus Saskatchewan, or just, yeah, anything. If you've been there, if you live there, that'd be really cool to hear about. And if you're interested in more videos like this, me reacting to Canadian things that I've never seen before, feel free to subscribe for more. And until then, thanks for watching, and see you next time. What's going on, everyone? I'm just a typical, average American here today to react to this video called 1 Week in Canada, where this guy who's never been to Canada actually traveled there so he could report back to the rest of us about, well, what it's really like. And now, I actually think, for the most part, here in the United States, we definitely have our own preconceived idea of what Canada is supposed to be like. And so today, I thought it'd be really cool to check this out and hear about this experience from somebody who actually traveled there for the very first time. So,
you probably know Vistaprint for business cards, but did you know we print everything you need to brand your business? We print banners and signs that help you stand out, and must-have merch like tote bags, t-shirts, and hoodies. If you need it, we print it. Print it all with 20% off for new customers with code NEW20 at vistaprint.ca.
Let's take a look.
Canada! It's a country that everybody seems to love.
Yes.
Why do they love Canada so much? I didn't get it. Until I went to visit Canada. What I saw there and what I'm about to show you will make you fall in love with Canada even more.
Okay. Yeah. This has got some energy. This got me a bit pumped up to see Canada. And it's like, honestly, I can really relate to a lot of what he is saying. I think for a lot of people around the world, and certainly here in the United States, Canada has such a great reputation. And what goes along with that is that for a lot of us, I think we can't help but wonder, does Canada live up to the amazing reputation that you have? You know, it's kind of a blessing and a curse. Is it true? Because I think there's high expectations, but I don't know. That's why I think I'm really curious to kind of see what this 1 week visit was actually like. It says day 1 arriving in Canada.
This is a generalization, but hear me out. In my life, I met many Canadians, and to my surprise, 99% of them were... For some reason, every Canadian I meet is just a nice, wholesome human being.
Okay. I mean, come on, let's be honest. This is like very anecdotal. Like, he I mean, it's a sample size of Canadians. There's no doubt about that. And according to him, 99% of the Canadians he has interacted with were genuinely nice people, which, honestly, like, yeah. Some people will say, oh, it's a generalization, or it's like you can't tell from just a gaggle of people. This is like more than just a gaggle. This is like, frankly, if you speak to this many different people, you can kind of get some kind of idea, I think, you know, not to like stereotype or generalize, but it can't just be a coincidence that he happened. Look at this. Look at this guy. They show a random Canadian guy, and he happens to look like the friendliest, most wholesome man you've ever seen in your life. Is that just coincidence? I don't think so.
They're friendly. They care about your well-being. They're polite, not arrogant. They say sorry a lot.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Sorry. Sorry.
Sorry.
Wow. Now that's a little stereotypical. Like, I don't actually expect every Canadian to say sorry, like, all the time, but from what I understand, it is, on the flip side, I'm trying to toe the line between, like, overgeneralizing and being realistic with this. It does seem like being respectful or polite is indeed an important part of Canadian culture. And I think for a lot of the world, that's one of the things we love about it.
And they even say sorry for the weather, even when it's not their fault.
So, sorry for the weather? That is next level. That is next level apologizing.
Don't get me wrong, Canada has its fair share of jerks like this guy.
Huh?
But the rest are...
What's this guy doing? Why? See, we are being realistic. For every crowd of people, there's one random jerk with a SpongeBob hat.
Are super polite. When I was a kid, I was taught that nice guys finish last. But Canada is a living proof of the opposite. That you can still be nice, humble, polite, and wholesome and build one of the best countries in the world.
That actually goes like a lot deeper than maybe he even realizes. Like, certainly here in the United States, that right there with him, that statement where he's like, I was taught being nice, like, isn't necessarily a good thing. And I think that is kind of a thing here in the United States. Like, unfortunately, don't get me wrong, being nice is a positive trait that a lot of Americans value. But there's also this other, like, underlying thing in American culture where it's like, if you're too nice, you're seen as weak, you're seen as you can be taken advantage of. Here in the US, we definitely have a culture of, like, be nice, but also, like, do what you gotta do to win, to be the best, to grind and succeed, and you gotta beat everyone else and be the best and be special. And That's definitely a big part of our culture, which at times seems kind of conflicting with being nice. But I feel like in Canada, you guys have proven that you can be successful and nice. As funny as it is to say, like that's actually really nice to see.
That's 1 minute, eh?
Canada's library?
Boring, boring, boring. Most libraries are boring.
That's true.
But not this one in Toronto, Canada, because here it's more than just books. Here, the library teaches you how to knit clothes. The library teaches you how to make shoes, how to public speak, how to paint, and even how to make sushi.
When it comes to matters of the bedroom, mixing it up can make all the difference.
At Sleep Country's Mix and Match event, we know that different people sleep in different ways. Some need perfect darkness and the temperature at exactly 18.3 degrees. Others can sleep anywhere, anytime. Now you can find the perfect sleep setup for both of you. Hurry in and get 25% off almost everything for a limited time. The Mix and Match event is on now, only at Sleep Country.
Talk about a good night's sleep.
Restrictions apply. Speak to a sleep expert for details.
What is it? He said this. Okay. This video is kind of all over the place, which I don't mind, but this is unexpected. We're at a library in Canada. I don't want to jump to conclusions and say that every library in Canada is like this. This is in Toronto. But I think, Toronto being the biggest city in Canada, right? That this definitely can demonstrate some of the ideals and some of the innovations that Canada has. And I mean, I've never seen a library where you make sushi. Okay.
They have a full replica of a Sherlock Holmes study room.
What?
They have printers that print in 3D. 1 million computers, 1 million books, 1 million newspapers.
What?
From 120 countries every day.
What? I mean, now this is actually turning out to be a lot more insightful than I thought. At first I was like, a library? Like, come on, you're gonna put me to sleep. This is genuinely one of the most interesting libraries I've ever seen. And it is located in Canada. So that definitely says something about Canadian culture. All the newspapers from all the different countries, the multiculturalism, the innovation, and also just kind of the playfulness. Yeah, like the playfulness of all the different areas and recreations. And it's not really something you see much here in the US.
And even studio.
Huh.
All of this is inside one of 100 libraries that are entirely free in Canada. There is no way to whisper it. The people of Canada have turned a boring place into a wonderland.
Wow.
That's 1 minute. See you tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely don't focus on... This is like a very modern library, which is nice to see because it felt like... I can't remember the last time I was at a library. I was kind of worried that they're dying or something. Very cool. Canada's heroes. Okay.
Meet Jim.
Hi, I'm Jim, and...
Again, you just show a random Canadian dude, and they just look friendly. Is that... You don't even have to do anything. Like... Is that just coincidence? I don't know.
I'm just a guy.
Jim is no ordinary guy because he single-handedly brought over 300 Syrian refugees to live in Canada.
Oh my God.
It's the most fulfilling thing I've ever done.
And how modest. Like, I don't know if it's true, but it seems like Canadians probably have a lot less of an ego than Americans in general. That seems to be, like, he said he's just a guy who's, like, saved 300 people's, like, that's insane. That's unbelievable. That's the opposite of just a normal guy. So I really, really like that attitude.
See, the country of Canada allows any Canadian citizen to personally sponsor refugees.
And that's what I did.
Oh. Oh, wow.
This successful businessman sponsored not 1 or 2, but 87 Syrian families out of his own pocket. And even though it cost him millions